Statutory interest versus contractual interest. Analysis. 1. Definition and source of authority. Statutory interest is interest imposed by law, typically to compensate a creditor for late payment or damages when no specific agreement exists between the parties. It is set by legislation and applies automatically in certain situations, such as late commercial payments or court-awarded damages. Contractual interest is interest that parties have expressly agreed upon in a contract. It reflects the terms negotiated between debtor and creditor, including the rate, calculation method, and circumstances under which it applies. Application and priority. If a contract specifies an interest rate and terms, contractual interest generally takes precedence over statutory interest. The agreed rate will apply as long as it is clear, unambiguous, and lawful. For example, if a contract states that overdue payments accrue interest at 3% above the Bank of England base rate, this rate will override the statutory rate. Statutory interest only applies when there is no valid contractual provision for interest or in situations specifically mandated by law, such as certain court judgments. Calculation and rates. Statutory interest rates are set by law and are often higher than typical market rates to incentivize timely payment. For example, the statutory rate for late commercial payments in the UK is 8% above the Bank of England base rate. Contractual interest rates are negotiated and can be fixed, floating, or pegged to a benchmark. The calculation method, simple or compound, and compounding frequency are also determined by the contract. Legal and practical implications. Legal compliance. Contractual interest must comply with usury laws and cannot exceed statutory maximums where such limits exist. Enforceability. Courts will enforce clear contractual interest provisions, but if a contract is silent or ambiguous, statutory interest may be applied instead. Compensation and costs. Choosing contractual interest may affect the creditor's ability to claim additional compensation or recovery costs under statutory regimes. For example, in the UK, if contractual interest is claimed, the creditor may lose the right to statutory compensation for late payment. Court treatment. Courts distinguish between the two. Contractual interest is a contractual liability and forms part of the claim, while statutory interest is a separate, discretionary remedy provided by law. This distinction can affect the calculation of damages and the jurisdiction in which a claim is brought. Statutory interest is a legal default, ensuring creditors are compensated when no contract exists or when the law mandates it. Contractual interest is privately negotiated and usually prevails if clearly stated and lawful. The choice between them affects not only the amount recoverable, but also legal rights and remedies, making careful drafting and understanding of both essential in commercial agreements. Let's make a recap of this lesson with a multiple choice question scenario. Company X supplies goods to Company Y. Their contract states, interest on overdue payment shall accrue at 4% above the Bank of England base rate, compounded monthly. Company Y pays late. The statutory interest rate for late commercial payments is 8% above the Bank of England base rate, simple interest. Company X claims statutory interest and statutory compensation for late payment. Question: which of the following is correct regarding Company X's entitlement to interest and compensation? A. Company X can claim both the contractual interest and statutory compensation for late payment. B. Company X can claim statutory interest and statutory compensation, even though the contract specifies a different interest rate. C. Company X can only claim the contractual interest rate, not statutory interest or statutory compensation, because the contract clearly specifies the interest terms. D. Company X can choose whichever interest rate is higher, contractual or statutory, and also claim statutory compensation. Answer: C. Company X can only claim the contractual interest rate, not statutory interest or statutory compensation, because the contract clearly specifies the interest terms. If a contract clearly sets interest for late payments, contractual interest applies and statutory interest or compensation does not.